Welcome to Haunting Whispers, where the eerie and unknown come to life through spine-chilling stories. Our channel dives into the depths of horror, blending suspenseful narratives with vivid storytelling that will keep you on edge. From ghostly apparitions to haunted roads, each tale is crafted to stir your imagination and send shivers down your spine. Whether you're a fan of the supernatural, urban legends, or psychological thrillers, there's something here to captivate every horror enthusiast. Subscribe now and join us in exploring the shadows where fear meets fiction. Let us start the story.
Never-ending tracks. Beneath the bustling city lies a forgotten world. The underground subway system, this vast labyrinth of tunnels, hidden away from the public eye, weaves its way beneath the city's surface like a dark vein. The system is ancient, its once bright lights now dim and flickering, and its walls lined with rust and decay. What was once a state-of-the-art transportation network is now a relic of the past, a forgotten underworld that few ever think to explore. The tunnels stretch on endlessly in every direction, winding in patterns that seem to make little sense. In some parts of the subway, the walls are smooth and modern, while in others they are cracked and weathered, crumbling as though they haven't been touched in years. A low hum reverberates through the system, the distant sound of trains that are no longer there, the echoes of something long since abandoned. The narrow corridors seem to trap the sound, amplifying the silence that hangs over them. Occasionally an old train rattles through the tracks, its movements heavy and sluggish, its headlights casting long, ominous shadows on the walls. But these moments are fleeting, and the train's presence only serves to deepen the sense of isolation. The subway, once a vital artery for commuters, is now little more than a hollow shell of what it used to be, with an eerie sense of abandonment that hangs in the air like a thick fog. As the train moves through the tunnels, it becomes apparent just how vast the system is. The passageways stretch deep underground, far beyond the reach of sunlight. Some tunnels seem to go on forever, while others appear to twist and loop in ways that defy logic. Even those who are familiar with the subway above ground may find themselves disoriented by the maze below, where the passage of time feels warped and distorted. The further one goes into the depths, the more oppressive the environment becomes. The air grows heavy and damp, thick with the musty scent of mildew and decay. Even the flickering lights on the walls seem to pulse in time with the low rumbling of the trains, casting long, jittery shadows across the tracks. Each step taken in these dark corridors feels like an intrusion, as though the underground world is alive, and it doesn't take kindly to visitors. The atmosphere of this underground world is what makes it truly unsettling. Above ground, the city is alive, constantly buzzing with activity. The lights are bright, the streets are crowded, and the air is filled with the sounds of life. Cars honking, people talking, and the general hum of civilization. But down here, in the subway, it's as if time has come to a standstill. The constant noise of the city above is replaced by an unnatural silence that feels unnatural. This silence is not peaceful, however. It's the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're not alone. It's a quiet that's too deep, too pervasive, and it weighs heavily on the mind. Every footstep echoes, amplifying the sense of isolation. The sound of the train's wheels scraping against the tracks can be heard long before the train itself comes into view, sending a ripple of unease through the empty platform. The dim lighting, often inadequate to fully illuminate the space, only adds to the eerie ambiance. It casts long, stretching shadows on the walls, creating an illusion that something might be lurking just out of sight. These shadows seem to move of their own accord, as though the tunnels themselves are alive, shifting and stretching in response to some unseen presence. The occasional flicker of the overhead light sends a chill down the spine, the brief moments of darkness making you question whether you're truly alone. The light is harsh when it does shine, creating stark contrasts between the dark corners and the brightly lit sections of the platform. But these bursts of light are fleeting. and they do little to reassure those who venture too far into the bowels of the subway. The further into the system one ventures, the more oppressive the atmosphere becomes. The air is thick with the smell of old concrete, oil, and the stagnant dampness of forgotten places. Every breath feels like it's heavier than the last, the weight of the underground pressing down on the chest. The temperature shifts unpredictably, and you itch all over with animal fear and hope of escaping. Oh, sometimes it's too cold, the chill of old stone seeping into the bones, while other times the air feels uncomfortably warm, thick and cloying, as if the tunnels are closing in around you. The stillness is punctuated only by the occasional distant sound of a train passing somewhere deeper in the labyrinth. Its presence is both reassuring and unsettling. It suggests that the system is still alive in some way, that there are other places in the city that are still connected to the underground network. But the further one moves into the depths, the less likely it is that anyone will cross paths with another person. In fact, it's rare to encounter anyone at all down here. The subway system, once a hive of activity, is now abandoned with only the faintest echoes of the past remaining. The platforms are often empty, and the few people who do still travel through the system are often those who are lost or who have nowhere else to go. The isolation is absolute, and it's easy to forget that the world above exists at all. Key detail: the city above versus the subway below. One of the most unsettling aspects of the underground subway system is the stark contrast between the world above and the world below. Above ground, the city is alive, a chaotic, vibrant metropolis where people bustle through the streets, their lives full of noise and movement. But beneath the surface, it's as if all that energy is drained away. The city above is full of life, while the subway below is full of death. Metaphorically speaking, it feels as though the underground has been forgotten by the city, a place that exists only in shadow, removed from the world above. From the perspective of someone who is familiar with the city's busy streets and crowded corners, it's easy to dismiss the underground as just another part of the urban sprawl. But once you descend into the depths of the subway, it's impossible not to notice the stark difference. The city above seems to be full of life, bustling with energy and purpose, while the subway below feels like a lost world, cut off from everything else. While it's easy to imagine that something could happen down here, that something could get lost in the tunnels, and it would never be found again. And I think there's a strange disconnect between the two worlds. While the streets above are alive with the clamor of everyday life, the subway feels like a forgotten relic, its only purpose now to carry the occasional late-night commuter through the darkness. The city has long since moved on, but the subway still lingers, trapped in a timeless state of decay. The trains continue to rumble through the tunnels, though they seem to serve no real purpose anymore. The tracks are there, but the destination is unclear. This contrast between the bustling city above and the silent labyrinth below is what makes the subway so chilling. It's easy to forget how quickly things can turn from ordinary to strange, from everyday life to something more terrifying. The subway is a reminder that beneath the surface of even the most vibrant cities, there are dark corners where life is no longer thriving, and where the echoes of the past continue to haunt those who venture too far. In the end, the subway system is more than just a means of transportation. It's a symbol of isolation, of being cut off from the world above. The city may be alive, but down here, in the heart of the underground, it's as if the rest of the world has forgotten that this place ever existed. And it's one thing to lose friends and family, but it's another thing to lose your sense of from within. Certain things remain alive when time just suffers alone. And that's where it comes from me, Then the protagonist, the late night commuter. The protagonist is a solitary commuter, accustomed to the rhythm of the city. It's late, and after a long day of work, they find themselves walking with slow, heavy steps towards the subway station. The city's streets, once filled with bustling crowds and honking cars, now stand still, illuminated only by streetlights casting long shadows. "Who's hanging out?" asks the commuter, unable to take his eyes off the subway. The day's exhaustion weighs heavily on their shoulders, their mind numb from the routine tasks of the office, the endless meetings, and the clicking of keyboards. They long for the comfort of their apartment, for the simplicity of home. This commuter is a creature of habit, one who has been riding the same subway line every day for years. They've grown used to the hum of the train, the echoing footfalls of other late-night travelers, and the inevitable sense of drowsiness that creeps in with each passing stop. They know these tunnels like the back of their hand. Each turn, each station, each slight bump of the train as it moves along its path. The engine's always the same. For the protagonist, the subway is a familiar part of life, neither something to fear nor something to be excited about. It's a simple, necessary journey to the end of the day. But tonight, something feels different. It's not the kind of difference that hits you all at once. It's more of a subtle shift, a disturbance just beneath the surface of the everyday. But at this point, the protagonist is too tired to recognize it. They are consumed with the thoughts of home, their bed, and perhaps a cup of tea to wind down before sleep overtakes them. The commuter, in their mind, is merely following the well-worn path of the nightly routine. As they descend into the subway station, the lights flicker above them, but it doesn't register as anything out of the ordinary. The rhythmic sound of their footsteps echoes in the hollow, vacant space of the underground. They pass by empty platforms, their faces expressionless, tired eyes scanning the empty benches and stairwells, unconcerned by the absence of others. The familiar sense of loneliness is not new to them. It's just part of the late-night commute. It's just part of the late-night commute. The commuter reaches the platform, glancing at the time on their watch. It's nearly midnight. The last train of the night will be arriving soon. They stand near the edge of the platform, feeling the soft vibration of the tracks beneath their feet as they wait for the train. The station is eerily quiet, more so than usual, but their mind brushes it off, attributing it to the late hour. Psychological state. The protagonist's mental state is fatigued. They are mentally exhausted from the day's work and are desperate for rest. Every thought seems weighed down by exhaustion. The hustle and bustle of their regular life is already forgotten as they stand waiting in the dimly lit subway station, eyes half closed. The dull hum of the fluorescent lights above them fills their mind, blending with the distant sound of an approaching train. They are lost in their own thoughts, only half conscious of their surroundings and struggling to keep their focus. Saliva-free participating bodies are... This mental state plays into the overall tone of the story. This isn't someone on alert, aware of their surroundings. They're distracted and detached. A perfect setup for the eerie turn of events that awaits them. The fatigue they feel dulls their senses, making them more susceptible to the strange and unsettling atmosphere around them. This isn't, they are in a fog, mentally and physically worn down, unable to detect the things that might otherwise trigger their instincts to question the oddities surrounding them. There's a sense of indifference to their environment. In the commuter's mind, the subway is a neutral place, neither pleasant nor frightening. It's simply a means to an end, a brief transit between the day and the night, the familiar hum of the train, the rattling of the rails, the soft whir of the air. These are the sounds that comfort them, the rhythm of their routine. Nothing seems out of place, yet the emptiness around them stirs a faint undercurrent of unease. But the second you explore the unhealthy, the order of your world comes unexpectedly to the forefront. and that's when you stop to note the sound of ringing bells, the empty stockings, the fallen leaves. They make a small, unconscious effort to shake off any lingering thoughts of discomfort. It's nothing, they reassure themselves. They've been through this every night. The train will come, and they'll board, and then it's off to their quiet home, far away from the long workdays and the pressing obligations. It's not where we're going at the end of the Rainbow Trail, but we're going to leave our bears at the lions and the things that rest there. That looks so plain. But the unease grows, ever so slightly. The station feels too empty, even for this late hour. Typically, there are at least a few other passengers, heads bowed in exhaustion, scrolling through their phones or leaning against the walls. But tonight, there's nothing, not a soul in sight. Still, the commuter shrugs off this peculiar feeling, telling themselves it's just a quiet night. After all, who else would be traveling at this hour? First clue, the subway seems unusually empty. The commuter's first real clue that something isn't quite right happens just as the train arrives. It's not the usual rattle and roar of the train they are used to, but rather a soft, almost imperceptible hum, like the sound of a machine running just below its optimal speed. The train pulls into the station, and for a moment, the commuter feels a slight shiver of discomfort. The train runner, with all dignity, stands up and says at the opposite side of the train, looking nervously at his companions from the very front of the train. The doors open, but there's something strange about the train. It's too quiet, its interior too dark. The lights inside flickering erratically, as if the power is unstable. The commuter hesitates for only a second, distracted by the uncomfortable flickering lights inside the train. But they don't think much of it. They're just tired, and the lateness of the hour must be playing tricks on their mind. As they step onto the train, the unsettling silence is reinforced. No one else is boarding. The car is empty. Normally, even at this late hour, there's usually one or two other passengers, perhaps a tired office worker, a late night party goer, or someone heading home from an evening shift. But tonight, there's no one. The commuter remains focused on their own tiredness, still convinced it's just the hour, or perhaps a particularly slow night. The train begins to move, its wheels clattering faintly against the tracks, but the usual sounds of movement, the shifting of people, the rustling of bags, the soft murmur of voices, are absent. The stillness is palpable. It's not just the absence of passengers, it's the absence of life, of energy. It's the kind of emptiness that begins to feel unsettling, but the commuter, still too tired to focus on anything beyond the end of their journey, lets it slide. So it's as the train pulls further into the depths of the subway system, the lights flicker again, casting erratic shadows across the worn and grimy interior. The sound of the train itself becomes muffled, as if it's moving through a tunnel deeper than the commuter has ever experienced before. Their eyelids droop slightly, fatigue finally winning, but that strange feeling, a sense of being alone, isolated, begins to gnaw at the back of their mind. Still, they don't think much of it. It's just a late night train, they're tired, they're alone, but it's not unusual. The first clue, however subtle, has been planted. The train is eerily empty, and the environment is quiet in a way that is not comforting. There's a silence that presses against the commuter, and yet their exhaustion keeps them from questioning it fully. They allow themselves to let go of that first wave of unease, believing it's just their tired mind playing tricks, but deep down, a flicker of something unsettled lingers. And allowing your gaze to not focus on all the symptoms of uneasiness, seeing the main current lingers on the floor. And the story has just begun. Boarding the train and description of the train. The train that arrives at the platform is nothing like the sleek, modern trains the protagonist is used to. At first glance, it seems like a relic from another time. An old, rusted hulk of a train that has somehow found its way into the midst of a cutting-edge transit system. Its once gleaming exterior has long since faded, now covered in patches of grime and peeling paint, giving it a worn-out, forgotten look. The train carriages creak under their own weight, and the metal of the wheels and doors seems to groan in protest as it comes to a stop. The train's presence feels out of sync with the rest of the station, as if it belongs in a time long past, or worse, a place that should never have been found. The flickering lights on the train's exterior give off a dim, yellow glow, casting jagged shadows onto the tracks as it pulls in. The station's sterile modernity feels worlds apart from this rusty, decrepit train. The faint glow of the lights inside the train can be seen through the windows, but it's an unsettling sight. The interior is far darker than what would be expected at this hour, the lights inside flickering irregularly, casting eerie shadows that seem to shift and move as the train stands still. The protagonist's initial instinct is to dismiss the odd appearance of the train. After all, it's just a late night, and the commuter is tired. Perhaps maintenance hasn't been up to par, or the train simply hasn't been serviced recently. But still, something about it feels wrong. This sense of discomfort begins to build, a gnawing feeling in the back of the mind that grows more pronounced with each passing second. Is there something strangely off about the train's rusted appearance in such a modern system? It's like finding a forgotten relic in a place that should have long since discarded it. The commuter, however, is too tired to pay much attention. It's late, and their only focus is reaching home. So they step forward, mindlessly heading toward the nearest door. So it's like, it is strange because as the commuter steps closer to the train, their footfalls echo loudly against the empty station. The usual sound of people boarding, the soft murmur of voices, or the shuffle of shoes against the platform is conspicuously absent. There's no one else around. No other passengers seem to be waiting for this late night ride. The train's automatic doors begin to close with a sudden, unnaturally smooth motion that catches the commuter's attention. Loud banging. Normally the doors would slide open or shut with a loud mechanical whir, the usual groan of old machinery at work. But these doors move almost silently, closing with an eerie precision. There's no sound, no squeak of metal, no hissing of hydraulic pressure. The movement is unnervingly smooth, like a well-oiled machine. Yet it feels wrong. Too perfect for a train in this condition. The commuter stands still for a moment, slightly taken aback by the oddity. They've seen automatic doors close plenty of times, but this feels different. Too smooth, too flawless. The usual mechanical noise is absent, and the whole movement feels almost unnatural, like something that shouldn't be happening. But their fatigue overrides any inclination to turn away. They've come this far and the train is here. It's time to board, to get home, to end the day. So they step onto the train without a second thought, the door sealing behind them with that same unnervingly smooth motion. The inside of the train is darker than expected. There are no bright overhead lights or the usual sterile glow that would typically fill a modern subway car. Instead, the lighting flickers intermittently, casting the interior in a sickly dim light. The seats are old, threadbare and faded, covered in patches of grime with cracks in the leather and fabric that reveal years of neglect. A strange odor fills the air, a mix of must, rust, and something vaguely chemical, like the scent of aged metal and forgotten machinery. There are no other passengers, no conductor to greet them. It's eerily silent. The air inside the car feels thick, almost suffocating, as if it's been sealed off from the rest of the world for much too long. The silence is deafening, broken only by the faint sound of the train's wheels clicking along the tracks and the occasional flicker of the dim lights above. It's as though the world outside has vanished, leaving only the commuter and this strange, isolated train. The protagonist glances around the car, their minds starting to feel the weight of the silence, the emptiness, but they quickly push the thoughts aside. It's just a late night. They're tired. They want to get home. The fact that there's no conductor or anyone else present should be unsettling, but it's not. They're used to the late night solitude of the subway, and the idea of being alone isn't a cause for alarm. I wasn't expecting to end up staying here, Clay finally says. It's a familiar, if somewhat lonely, part of the routine. The train begins to move, but not in the way the commuter expects. Normally, there's the standard jolt of the train as it accelerates, a slight lurch forward followed by the familiar rhythm of the train clicking along the tracks. But this time, the movement is smooth. Too smooth. The train begins to glide forward with an almost unnatural ease, the motion fluid and silent, without the usual sounds of the engine straining against the rails or the hiss of the brakes as it starts its journey. There's no announcement over the intercom, no voice guiding passengers to their destinations, no sounds to indicate that the journey has begun. The commuter is too tired to question this oddity. After all, it's just a late night ride. Perhaps there's been a delay in the system, and the conductor is off the train for some reason. Perhaps the train has been left to move on its own to its next destination. The idea of it being an automated system doesn't fully register. For whatever reason, life had never been this easy. I crossed the border. I found a botanical. The commuter, eyes half closed from exhaustion, rests against the back of the seat, willing themselves to relax, to let the quiet hum of the train's movement lull them into a state of semi-consciousness. But with each passing moment, the lack of announcements becomes more unsettling. The train doesn't stop at any of the usual stations. The windows, fogged with age, blur the view outside, making it difficult to discern where they're going. The station names outside are all unfamiliar. The train doesn't seem to be following its usual path. The commuter can't help but feel a strange, creeping sensation of disorientation. The rhythmic clicking of the wheels is the only sound, louder now, as if it's mocking the silence, amplifying the sense of isolation. There's no sign of the outside world, no indication of the train's destination, and no sign of the usual transit patterns. The commuter struggles to make sense of the situation, but their tired mind fails to grasp any coherent explanation. The train's movements continue, silent and steady, as it carries them deeper into the unknown tunnels of the underground world. Look, he's going after the underneath the train station. Look, he's going after the surface to land on, maybe in a cave. The sensation of being trapped, of being carried away from the familiar and the known, begins to grow stronger, but the protagonist remains too exhausted to fully acknowledge it. Their thoughts are foggy, their mind drifting, unable to connect the strange details. And the fogginess is beginning to shroud. Everything seems flashing blurry at this point. Time becomes irrelevant. The seconds stretch into minutes, then hours, and the commuter can't tell if they've been traveling for a few moments or an eternity. The train moves, smooth and silent, into the dark, endless unknown. I'm missing something. I wonder if I hurt him, a grip on my arm. So whether it's an escape from my day, the sense of unease begins to solidify. The train, now fully engulfed in the dark labyrinth of tunnels, moves forward without purpose. There's no announcement, no clarity, and no sense of direction. The commuter has boarded the train, and now there's no turning back. The train's endless journey. As the train continues its descent into the dark, claustrophobic labyrinth of tunnels, the sense of time begins to warp. What initially felt like an ordinary late-night commute has now taken on a strange and unsettling quality. The tunnel outside the train's windows seems endless, stretching out into the black void, with no sign of light or exit. The tunnel is shaped like an hour, zigzagging with movement, and my stomach rumbles nervously. The lights in the train flicker again, casting long, unsettling shadows along the floor, as if the train itself is caught in a never-ending twilight zone. The journey, which should have been a brief ride through a familiar route, has turned into something far more sinister, like a ride through a forgotten underworld. At first, the commuter tries to dismiss the feeling of unease, attributing it to exhaustion and the lingering disorientation of a late-night commute. But as the minutes turn into what feels like hours, a growing realization begins to take hold. The landmarks outside the windows that the commuter recognizes, the familiar signs of the subway system, the graffiti-tagged walls, the distinctive entrances and exits, should have long since been passed. They should be approaching the next station by now, or perhaps already at their destination. Yet, with each passing moment, those landmarks remain disturbingly visible, as if the train is caught in some kind of loop. The commuter shifts in their seat, glancing out the window, their mind racing as they try to make sense of the situation. The tunnel remains as dark and oppressive as ever, but those once familiar landmarks are still within view. The train should have been moving forward, progressing through the system, but instead it feels like it's retracing its own path. The commuter feels the weight of panic slowly creeping in, but they fight to maintain their composure. I pan here. Hey, you see accused foreign community. Surely it's just a malfunction in the system, a delay. They've ridden this line countless times before. This is just a temporary glitch. But the more they try to reason with themselves, the more disconcerting the situation becomes. They focus harder, trying to spot the exact signs of progress, but the same walls and graffiti appear again and again, an unnerving déjà vu that deepens the sense of dread. It feels as though they've crossed the same stretch of tracks over and over, as if the train is trapped in a never-ending loop, unable to break free from the darkness. Earlier, the tunnels seem to bend and shift, as if the very structure of the subway system has been distorted, warping the train's journey into something altogether unnatural. It's as though the train is no longer part of the familiar subway network. The commuter begins to wonder if they've somehow crossed into another realm, one where time and space are no longer governed by the laws of the physical world. Scott says to different dogs to make sure they're wearing lighter. You know, somebody told me once that you actually have to correct the router in order to realize that the train is traveling. But strange noises and shadows. As the minutes stretch on, the train's eerie silence grows even more unsettling. The rhythmic hum of the train's movement is now punctuated by strange, unnatural noises. Soft, muffled sounds that echo faintly through the car. At first, the commuter thinks it's just the sound of the train's machinery, the groan of old metal under pressure. But these noises are different. They are too soft, too subtle, to be the sounds of a malfunctioning subway car. "Ferry!" Leo yells. "Basically, we should go out for a little light." They sound like footsteps, distant, echoing footsteps, the kind that should be impossible in a train that appears to be completely empty. The sounds don't follow any predictable pattern, coming and going in short bursts, always just out of reach. The commuter's eyes flick to the seat across from them, half expecting to see someone sitting there, but the seat is still empty. There's no one else in the train car. Yet the footsteps continue, slowly and steadily, echoing through the silent train. The strange, lingering sound makes the commuter's heart race in their chest. They glance nervously around the car, looking for the source, but see nothing. The train is eerily silent again, except for the persistent clicking of the wheels on the track, which now feels oddly distant, like it's coming from another plane of existence entirely. Then there's the whispering. At first, it's barely audible, a soft murmur that the commuter dismisses as their own imagination. But as the train moves deeper into the darkness, the whispers grow louder, becoming more distinct. The voices are soft, low, unintelligible, but unmistakably human. The hairs on the back of the commuter's neck stand on end as they strain to hear. They lean forward, pressing their ear toward the empty space in the car, but the whispers are always just beyond comprehension. always just out of reach. They seem to come from all directions, filling the car with a feeling of oppressive unease, as if the walls themselves are closing in, enclosing the commuter in a prison of sound. Oh, every time they try to focus on the whispers, they seem to shift, changing direction, becoming more distorted. One moment, the voices sound like faint murmuring conversations. The next, they become distorted echoes, faint wails that send shivers down the commuter's spine. The sounds seem to bounce off the walls of the train, disorienting the commuter and further fueling their sense of claustrophobia. The silence is broken only by the flickering lights, which cast fleeting shadows across the car, adding to the overall sense of disorientation. The train car feels increasingly claustrophobic, the air thick with the weight of something unseen and malevolent. Unseen figures? The commuter's anxiety grows as the train continues its journey through the endless tunnels. They begin to see things, faint shapes moving at the edges of their vision. At first, it's easy to dismiss as a trick of the light, a mere fluke of shadow and perception. But the figures are always there, lurking just beyond the periphery of their gaze. A movement here, a fleeting outline there, just enough to catch the commuter's eye before it vanishes into the blackness. Hello. Hello. There are always going to be things to fear. They start to feel as though they are being watched. A sensation so intense it's almost palpable. Every time they turn their head, the figures vanish, slipping back into the dark corners of the car. But the shapes never stop moving. It's as if they are following the commuter's every movement, always lingering, just out of sight, always watching, but never revealing themselves. The fleeting figures come and go, never fully materializing, but leaving behind a feeling of dread that grows with every passing moment. At first, the commuter tries to ignore the sensation. It could be the shadows, the flickering lights, their tired mind playing tricks. But the figures become more persistent, more unsettling. They no longer appear as fleeting shadows, but now seem to take on more definite shapes. Humanoid forms that seem to crouch in the corners of the car, their features obscured by the darkness. The commuter tries to tell themselves they are imagining things, but the unsettling presence of these figures, always lingering at the edge of their vision, is impossible to shake. The shadows seem to move in patterns, too synchronized to be mere coincidence, as though they are somehow connected to the train's journey itself. The figures are always present, slipping in and out of view, their forms just beyond the reach of full recognition. Every time the commuter turns to look directly at them, they vanish, only to reappear in a different part of the car, closer than before. The train's eerie journey, accompanied by the unsettling whispers, strange noises, and the unending presence of these shadowy figures, slowly begins to drive the commuter toward the edge of their sanity. The feeling of being trapped, of being watched by unseen eyes, intensifies with every passing second. There is no escape, no end in sight. A sense of paralyzing fear in turning to avarice warns them to awareness, warns life, warns their own life. The commuter is caught in the endless cycle of the train's journey, surrounded by an invisible presence that seems to grow stronger with each passing moment. The realization is inescapable. They are not alone on this train. And the figures, whatever they are not there by accident. The growing horror. As the train picks up speed, the eerie stillness of the dark tunnels becomes oppressive. The walls of the tunnel blur, the lights flickering with increasing intensity, casting wild shadows across the train car. The sudden rush of motion creates an odd sense of disorientation, as if the laws of space and time no longer apply. The train's forward motion seems to accelerate, but the distance traveled is impossible to measure. I don't know who he is, I hear him, but I don't think he would be anti-Semitic in any way. The commuter's heart races in response to the mounting tension, and their grip on the armrest tightens, fingers digging into the cold metal as if to ground themselves. With each passing moment, the tunnel seems to stretch, the walls distorting into a surreal, nightmarish landscape. The once familiar tracks now twist and warp, taking on bizarre, impossible angles that defy logic. The train speeds up again, the whirring of the wheels deafening in the otherwise silent train car, until the rapid motion creates an illusion that the train isn't moving through physical space at all. Instead, it feels like the train is slipping in and out of different realities. One moment speeding through an endless stretch of tunnel, and the next emerging into an infinite, ever-changing landscape of darkness and light. The commuter tries to focus on the familiar hum of the train and the rhythmic clack of the wheels against the tracks, but with every second that passes, the sense of time becomes more fluid and unreliable. The air in the train feels thicker, harder to breathe, as though the oxygen itself is being sucked from the car. The fluorescent lights flicker and buzz above, casting everything in a sickly, inconsistent glow. The train's speed is dizzying now, far faster than any subway should travel, yet the commuter is helpless, seated in this strange, mechanical vessel as it hurtles deeper into the unknown. Every turn, every sudden jerk of the car makes it seem as though the train is no longer confined to the rigid structure of this subway system, but is instead breaking free from the boundaries of reality. It's straggling against the laws of physics, yet all the while the temperature dips by hundreds of degrees. The commuter's head spins as the tunnels twist into impossible shapes. Their sense of balance falters, and their perception of the passage of time becomes a distant, forgotten concept. What was once a predictable, mundane journey is now a bizarre ride through an ever-shifting dreamscape. In the moments of clarity, they glance nervously at the windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of something, anything, that might confirm that they are still within the familiar confines of the subway system. But the outside world is nothing but a black void, an impenetrable wall of darkness. There's no telling how far they've traveled, nor what awaits beyond the flickering lights. Whispers and dread. As the disorientation deepens, the whispers return, soft at first, just barely audible over the roar of the train. They seem to emanate from every corner of the train car, flowing like an invisible current through the still air. The voices are not loud or distinct, but they are unmistakably human, filled with a strange urgency, and yet there is no one in the car with the commuter. The murmurs grow louder, like whispers spoken into the ears of the commuter, yet no one is near. The words themselves are unintelligible, but the tone is unmistakable. There is an underlying sense of dread in those whispers, a faint, almost imperceptible thread of malice woven through the sounds. The whispers curl through the air like invisible tendrils, as if the very walls of the train are alive with some hidden, malevolent force. They seem to creep closer with every passing moment, and the commuter becomes keenly aware that the voices are not just passing sounds, but are coming from the very structure of the train itself. The walls seem to hum with an energy of their own, as though they are speaking in some forgotten language, a language the commuter is not meant to understand. And then, just as suddenly, the voices shift. The whispers grow louder, and now they begin to form words, though still barely audible. The commuter's heart skips a beat as they strain to hear the fragments of speech, their mind fighting against the growing panic. There is no pattern to the voices. Some sound frantic, others resigned, and still others speak in haunting tones, as if recounting something that has long been lost to time. The words are all disjointed, never forming a coherent sentence, but each individual utterance carries a weight that seems to press down on the commuter's chest. Suddenly, the train lurches forward with a violent jolt, sending the commuter's body slamming against the metal seat, and the whispers intensify into an overwhelming crescendo. The voices now seem to come from everywhere at once, The walls, the floor, the ceiling, every inch of the train is alive with these murmured words, which grow louder and more frantic. They press into the commuter's mind like a barrage of conflicting thoughts, each one harder to ignore than the last. Oh, hey! Suddenly, the commuter feels a strong hand back in the parade rest. Oh, wait, sorry. No. The words start to form phrases, but they are cryptic, and cryptic in a way that is almost maddening. There are mentions of endless tunnels, no escape, and the system that never ends. Each whisper brings with it a sense of growing despair, and the commuter feels as if they are being swallowed by the very darkness that surrounds them. The air in the train car seems thick with suffocating pressure, and the weight of the whispers seems to take on a tangible form, like an invisible hand pushing against their chest. The voices do not comfort or explain, they only provoke unease. Their message is cryptic and full of dread. And just boom, short battled. Short list. Short list. The realization. The train continues its relentless journey through the pitch black tunnels, and the commuter's mind is no longer able to hold on to the comforting delusion that they are simply stuck in a delayed system. No, something is very wrong here. The commuter's heart begins to race as the unsettling realization sinks in. They are no longer simply a passenger on a train. They are trapped. The very tunnels they once knew as a familiar transit system have become a twisted, endless void. Every stop, every passing station is an illusion, a fleeting glimpse of something that doesn't exist. The first clue comes when the train passes a station that the commuter recognizes from their normal route. But as they glance up at the clock on the platform, they see that it is exactly the same time it was when they boarded. No time has passed. Panic rises in their chest as they realize that they have been trapped in an endless cycle with no way out. The station is empty, the platform abandoned, and the lights flicker ominously overhead, but the train keeps moving. Six-cylinder. Each time the commuter looks outside, they see the same desolate stations that look eerily similar to the ones they've passed before. There is no way to discern how long they've been traveling, but it feels like an eternity, an endless cycle with no beginning and no end. The train has no destination, no clear direction, and each stop is either abandoned or unreachable. Passengers, no conductor, just the commuter, and the ever-present, invisible whispers that now feel like they are filling every corner of the train. The feeling of helplessness is suffocating. The commuter presses their hand against the cold glass of the window, the sensation of touch offering no comfort, as the world outside remains a suffocating darkness. There are no signals of hope, no signs that they are progressing, just endless tunnels of blackness. The once familiar subway system has become a prison, an endless track leading nowhere, and the commuter is its only occupant. Leave here forever. It's too much. It's enough the sacrifices might not be justified. The horrible truth sinks in like a weight pressing on their chest. There is no escape. They are trapped in the subway system forever. The train is not bound by the rules of time or space. It is an eternal loop, and the commuter is its unwilling passenger. Every stop is a cruel mirage, a fleeting illusion of hope that vanishes just as quickly as it appears. And as the voices intensify, speaking in languages that make no sense, the commuter realizes they are not alone in this nightmare. And then after the train realizes they are not alone in this nightmare, the whispers are not just the voices of other passengers. They are the voices of those who have been lost to the system, those who, like the commuter, have been consumed by the endless ride. The train rattles forward, deeper into the darkness. Climax, a desperate attempt to escape. Time, or what is left of it, becomes an oppressive force that drives the commuter's mind to desperation. The train, still moving relentlessly through the endless winding tunnels, offers no sense of release or direction. The lights flicker sporadically, casting eerie, fleeting shadows across the empty train car. The whispers have grown louder, more insistent, like an unseen presence closing in on every side, suffocating the commuter with an overwhelming sense of dread. The air feels thick and suffocating, charged with an energy that seems foreign and malevolent. The commuter's grip tightens on the edge of the seat as the final threads of rational thought begin to fray. Panic rises, gnawing at the edges of their mind. I need to get off this train, they think frantically, as the walls seem to close in around them. Desperation takes hold like a vice. The realization that they are trapped in a mechanical nightmare, a forgotten corner of the city's subway system, is too much to bear. The train has no conductor, no end in sight. Only the haunting whispers and the terrifying uncertainty of what lies ahead. With a surge of adrenaline, the commuter bolts from their seat, stumbling toward the nearest set of doors. Their heart is racing, and their breathing comes in shallow, panicked gasps. They reach for the door handle, but it doesn't budge. It's locked, sealed shut as though the train itself is holding them hostage. The metallic surface of the door is cold beneath their fingertips, and they pull at it with all their strength, desperate for any sign of an exit. But the doors remain stubbornly closed, unmoving, as if mocking their efforts. Frustration wells up inside them, and they move from one door to another, each time with the same futile result. The train is a prison, its walls impenetrable. There are no windows to break, no emergency exits, no escape. The commuter's mind races, searching for some other way out, but the realization grows sharper with every passing moment. There is no way out. And not just any way out, there is only one way out, and that is through the doorway. There's no way out. The walls of the train car feel like they are closing in on the commuter, narrowing with every failed attempt to escape. They stumble backward, heart pounding, eyes wide in terror. The train's mechanical hum, once a reassuring sound of movement, now feels more like the steady pulse of a living entity, one that will not allow its prisoner to leave. The commuter collapses against a nearby pole, their body trembling with exhaustion and fear. Sweat beads on their forehead and their hands shake uncontrollably. They have nowhere left to turn. The only thing they are left with is the overwhelming feeling that they are at the mercy of something far greater than themselves. A haunting encounter? It is in this moment of utter despair, as the commuter is panting, their mind screaming for release, that something shifts. The shadows in the corners of the train car seem to move in a way that defies logic. For the first time, the commuter's attention is drawn to the periphery of the car, where a flickering shadow seems to solidify and grow more distinct. And then were stars, all of the shadows, like things you wouldn't even be aware of. If the commuter is pushing his wand 2, 3, 7 something at the very edge of vision, sending all conflicting what you have both recognized from your training as stars from the cosmography of the Earth's orbit. It's subtle at first, a vague, indistinct figure that flickers like a distortion in the very air, but it is enough to pull the commuter's focus away from their futile escape attempts. A cold shiver runs down their spine as the shape begins to form more clearly, the shadow seeming to, pulse and breathe, its contours sharp and eerie, and the commuter stares at the figure, heart racing, unsure whether they are hallucinating or truly seeing something supernatural. As the shadow solidifies further, the unmistakable outline of a figure materializes, a human figure. But it is not quite human. The shape is grotesque, its proportions twisted and unnatural, as though it is something pulled from the darkest corners of the commuter's subconscious. The figure stands motionless at the far end of the car, shrouded in a swirling darkness that seems to leak from its form. The commuter's breath catches in their throat as the figure begins to move. It glides silently across the floor, its limbs too smooth, its body unnaturally fluid. The faintest sound of scraping metal is all that breaks the silence as the figure draws closer, its presence heavy with an otherworldly energy. The commuter feels a wave of nausea wash over them, the air growing colder, thicker, as though the very temperature of the car is plummeting. As the figure comes closer, it becomes more distinct, and the commuter sees its face. The sight makes their blood run cold. It is not a face they recognize, but it is familiar in a way that sets their mind reeling. The face is gaunt, hollow-eyed, with sunken cheeks and lips drawn back in an eerie grin. The skin is pale, stretched too tight over the bones. It is the face of someone who has been lost for an eternity, whose soul has been trapped in the same hellish cycle the commuter now finds themselves in. The eyes of the figure are empty, like black voids that reflect nothing but despair. There is no life in them, only a cold, all-consuming emptiness. It is the face of someone who has been lost for an eternity, whose soul has been trapped in this same hellish cycle the commuter now finds themselves in. The eyes of the figure are empty, like cloudy haze. The figure reaches out, its hands long and spindly, its fingers twitching with an almost unnatural movement. The air around it seems to thicken, the temperature dropping further. The commuter feels the oppressive weight of the figure's presence as it draws near, and for a moment, they are paralyzed, unable to move, unable to tear their eyes away. The whispers in the air grow louder, now seeming to come from the figure itself, the voice not one but many, all chattering in overlapping, indecipherable tongues. Then, as if the figure senses the commuter's mounting terror, it tilts its head to one side, its grin widening, revealing a set of sharp, jagged teeth that look as though they could tear through flesh and bone. The figure's hand extends, and the cold that accompanies it sends a shock of ice through the commuter's body. The figure reaches out, and its touch is like nothing the commuter has ever experienced. It's cold, colder than anything they could have ever imagined. And the moment it makes contact with the commuter's skin, a burst of overwhelming dread floods their mind. It's as if the very essence of their soul is being siphoned away. Joyce. The commuter jerks back, snapping out of their paralysis, but the figure follows, its body moving with terrifying speed and precision. The commuter's pulse is pounding in their ears, their breath ragged with terror. I need to get out of here, they think, but the feeling of being trapped is suffocating, and their mind is starting to fray under the pressure. Their eyes dart around, searching for any way out, any escape from the nightmare they have found themselves in. But there is nothing. The train car is still empty, the door still locked. The figure is closing in, and the whispers are growing louder, more insistent, as if urging the commuter to embrace the darkness, to surrender to the endless ride. It is I, Clyde. And I blanked. But then, something shifts within the commuter. Amid the overwhelming terror and despair, a single thought pierces through the panic. What if I stop running? What if I just jump? The thought feels almost absurd in its simplicity, but it takes root in the commuter's mind, growing with each passing second. The figure is relentless. The train is a prison, with no clear way out. But perhaps, just perhaps, there is a way to break free of the cycle. The commuter's mind is now racing, battling between fear and an unknown desire to escape the endless loop. And then, as the figure approaches, its jagged smile widening ever further, the commuter makes a decision. They know they cannot stay in this nightmare any longer. They take a deep breath, ignore the growing whispers and the cold that grips their skin, and leap forward. It is not a leap of faith in the traditional sense, for the commuter knows the train is not bound by the physical laws of reality. Instead, it is a leap of desperation, an act of defiance against the forces that have bound them to this unending ride. The commuter throws themselves toward the doors, toward the darkness beyond. The very fabric of the train seems to tear apart as the commuter reaches out, determined to break free. So it's like the figure screams, an awful, distorted sound as the commuter hurtles toward the unknown. But the doors do not open. The walls do not give way. Instead, the train seems to dissolve around them, leaving only darkness, only the whispers, and the terrible realization that the commuter may have just crossed a threshold they were never meant to cross. The commuter's body freezes, their heart still pounding, but now they feel no fear, only a terrifying calm. The ride may never end. The twist, no escape. The commuter's breath quickens as the reality of their situation finally sets in. They have leapt forward with all the determination they could muster, expecting to break free of the train, to escape the unrelenting horrors that have plagued them. Yet, despite their desperate attempt to flee, nothing changes. The doors, which had seemed like their only hope of escape, do not open. There is no rush of fresh air, no sudden burst of light that would indicate freedom. There is no rush of fresh air, no release, no grace. Instead, everything remains eerily still, and across the street you can hear the roar of the train doesn't halt, and the darkness surrounding it seems to stretch out indefinitely. The moment the commuter leaps, they find themselves still within the confines of the same relentless journey. It's as though time itself has stopped moving forward, leaving the commuter suspended in an endless loop. The oppressive, eerie silence settles over them once again, thick and stifling. Minutes, maybe hours, pass in the same monotonous rhythm. The train hums as it continues its journey through tunnels that stretch on forever, yet each tunnel feels like a reflection of the last. The light flickers intermittently, casting the same unsteady glow across the same decrepit seats. The same unnatural stillness pervades, the same shadows dance in the periphery. We speed forever. The commuter tries to convince themselves that they've simply lost track of time, that there must be a logical explanation for everything that's happening. But deep down, a gnawing feeling of disillusionment creeps in. They glance around the train car, only to realize with increasing horror that nothing has changed. The seats are the same, the worn and faded advertisements on the walls are still there, offering messages from a long-forgotten past. The sound of the train's wheels on the tracks is the same unchanging rhythm. It is as if the commuter is trapped in a moment, frozen in time. And then as the train slows to a stop, the commuter hears the unmistakable sound, the one that they had hoped never to hear again, the faint but unmistakable sound of an opening door. Before they can react, they are thrust back into the same station, the one they had thought they had left behind. The same dingy platform lit only by flickering overhead lights. The same empty silence. The same cold, unnerving feeling of isolation. The commuter stares in disbelief as the doors of the train open, revealing a world they know all too well. The station is the same as it was when they first entered the train. The same echoes reverberate through the cavernous underground space. Each step they take met with the same disconcerting emptiness. Jane Mansfield Preston with all the human weight of the earth. There is no sense of progress, no sense of escape. The commuter looks around, desperate for something to change, but everything is as it was before. The doors close behind them as they exit the train, and yet the same sense of dread washes over them. The train, the station, the walls, they have not shifted, nor have they moved forward in time. Instead, it all feels like a sickening game of repetition. The waste hills above them have all but become a massive grimace, a faraway that they feel happy and miserable, competing for respect and love like two impossible prizes for a bad boy costume. Desperate and hopeless to win them all, the train cleaves town, and they never wake up. That's their play. That's all I need to know. They are back where they started. Final realization. The truth sinks in slowly, like a cold weight pressing against the commuter's chest. It isn't just that they're stuck. They're trapped in an endless cycle, a never-ending loop that has no end. Each time the train makes its rounds, it returns to the same point, to the same station, and the commuter is forced to get back on, compelled by some unseen force. The train doesn't need to stop at other stations because this station, this place, is the only one that matters. The commuter is now part of the system, an entity lost in time, forever riding the train that goes nowhere. It doesn't matter how many times they attempt to escape or how many times they jump forward into the unknown. The train always loops back, and they are always pulled back into its grip. It's a cruel, cyclical fate, a labyrinth that offers no way out, no escape from its twisted mechanics. Endless, world-wearing misery. It's just the same old, same old. What do I do? What do I do to threaten or try to leap for a minute? The eerie stillness of the station seems to echo this realization, amplifying the weight of the commuter's predicament. There is no way to leave this place, no way to break free. The once familiar sense of time has unraveled completely, and the commuter is left adrift in a world where time and space have no meaning. The haunting whispers that once felt distant now feel like they are coming from every corner of the station. Their voices like a constant presence in the commuter's mind. They are no longer just passing through, they are part of this system now, part of this subterranean maze, another lost soul in the labyrinth. The realization is a slow burn. The commuter's thoughts, once sharp and clear, become hazy and clouded as they come to terms with their fate. It's impossible to ignore the overwhelming feeling of insignificance that washes over them. They are no longer a person in control of their own destiny, but rather just another figure lost in the dark, hopelessly bound to the train's unyielding path. They are now a part of the system's cruel design, and there is no escape. The walls of the subway station feel like they are closing in, tightening around them with every passing second. It's a feeling that grows more suffocating as the realization deepens. They were never meant to escape. They were never meant to be anything other than a part of the never-ending cycle. Their face, their name, their presence, they are all starting to fade, lost in the vast, dark expanse of the underground world. The story's closing image. The commuter's body seems to grow weightless, as though their form is becoming transparent. Their features, once so distinct, begin to blur into the shadows, as though they are dissolving into the very air that surrounds them. It's a subtle, gradual process, the fading of a person's identity into the nothingness of the labyrinth they now inhabit. And then there's the last remnants of the commuter's presence vanish, leaving only the faintest impression behind. They are no longer a living, breathing person. They are simply another echo in the subway's haunted corridors, another whisper that mingles with the countless others who have come before them. Their faces no longer visible, their form lost to the shadows. Instead, they are but a memory, a ghost, trapped in the cycle, destined to repeat the same endless ride forever. No, philosophically, I'm glad you're finally hearing me. A ghost, trapped in the cycle, destined to repeat the same endless ride forever. The train hums its monotonous rhythm. The station remains eerily silent, and the whispers of lost souls swirl around the station's empty walls. The commuter is gone, but their essence lingers, just like the others who have been swallowed by the endless ride. As the last flicker of light fades from the platform, the train begins to move once more. The train begins to move once more. As the last flicker of light fades from the platform, the train begins to move once more, disappearing into the labyrinthine depths of the subways. And so the cycle continues. The labyrinth is eternal, and so are its prisoners.